freedom is a concept that many people take for granted, assuming that it simply means the absence of restrictions or the ability to do whatever we want. However, Friedrich Nietzsche presents a radically different view of freedom, one that emphasizes self-mastery over external liberation. His famous quote, "He who cannot obey himself will be commanded," challenges us to rethink what it means to be truly free. At first glance, this quote might seem paradoxical. If freedom is about escaping control, why would Nietzsche argue that we must obey ourselves? To understand Nietzsche's view, we need to look beyond the surface and examine what he means by self-obedience. For Nietzsche, true freedom is not found in rejecting all authority or living without rules. Rather, it is the ability to impose order on ourselves, our actions, desires, and impulses. Without this internal discipline, Nietzsche believes we cannot claim to be free. Instead, we are at the mercy of forces beyond our control. Nietzsche's idea of freedom is not the kind of freedom that comes from acting impulsively or giving in to every desire. In fact, Nietzsche would argue that this is not freedom at all, but a form of enslavement. The person who cannot control their own urges, who lets their desires dictate their actions, is not free. Rather, they are controlled by their desires. They are enslaved to the very impulses that they believe they are acting on freely. In this sense, true freedom, according to Nietzsche, requires us to overcome our own weaknesses and limitations, to be able to act intentionally rather than reactively. When Nietzsche says that he who cannot obey himself will be commanded, he is drawing attention to the consequences of failing to master ourselves. Without self-mastery, we are vulnerable to external influences. We are susceptible to the commands of others, whether those others are society, culture, or even our own unchecked impulses. If we cannot command ourselves, we will inevitably be commanded by something outside of ourselves. This could be the opinions of others, the pressures of society, or the force of our own habitual desires. In essence, we lose our agency and become subject to the whims of external forces. This is where Nietzsche introduces his concept of the will to power, which is central to his philosophy. The will to power is not just about exerting control over others. It is about mastering oneself. The will to power is the internal force that drives us to improve ourselves, to overcome our weaknesses, and to assert control over our own lives. It is the force that allows us to rise above the limitations imposed on us by our environment, our culture, or our own nature. Nietzsche believed that true freedom comes from harnessing this will to power and directing it towards self-mastery. Only when we have this power over ourselves can we be free in the truest sense of the word. This concept of self-mastery is linked to Nietzsche's idea of the Übermensch, or the overman. The Übermensch is not just a stronger or more powerful individual. The Übermensch represents someone who has fully mastered themselves. The Übermensch is not swayed by the values or expectations of society. Instead, they create their own values and live according to their own inner will. This is the highest form of freedom. Not the freedom to do whatever one pleases, but the freedom to live according to one's own authentic values and desires. The Übermensch is a figure who commands themselves completely, and as a result, they are not commanded by anything else. They are free because they have mastered their own nature, their desires, and their actions. This does not mean that the Übermensch lives without any limitations or restrictions. Instead, it means that the limitations they live by are self-imposed, based on their own values and choices. They are not beholden to the rules and norms set by others, nor are they slaves to their own impulses. Instead, They have created their own framework for living, a framework that allows them to act with purpose and meaning. Nietzsche's philosophy offers a radical rethinking of freedom. In his view, freedom is not the absence of constraints, but the ability to impose constraints on oneself. True freedom is not about acting on every impulse or desire. It is about the ability to act with intention and purpose, to shape one's life according to one's own will. Without self-mastery, Nietzsche argues, we are slaves to external forces. We are controlled by the expectations of society, the influence of others, and even the forces within ourselves that we fail to recognize or understand. This idea has profound implications for how we live our lives. Nietzsche's philosophy challenges us to examine whether we are truly free or whether we are simply reacting to the world around us. It asks us to consider whether we are living according to our own values or whether we are being controlled by external pressures. The modern world, with its constant bombardment of information, opinions, and societal expectations, makes it easy to lose sight of our own desires and goals. It's easy to let ourselves be shaped by the opinions of others, by the standards of society, or by the pull of our own unexamined desires. But Nietzsche's philosophy urges us to take responsibility for our own lives, to master ourselves, and to create our own path forward. Nietzsche's emphasis on self-mastery also connects to his broader critique of modern society. He believed that modern culture often promotes a kind of herd mentality, where individuals blindly follow the crowd and accept the values of society without question. In contrast, the person who has mastered themselves is able to stand apart from the crowd, to live according to their own vision of what is meaningful and important. This is the essence of the Übermensch, a person who creates their own values, lives by their own rules, and commands themselves completely. This radical vision of freedom requires us to confront the deepest aspects of our nature. It challenges us to question our impulses, desires, and motivations, and to recognize the ways in which we may be enslaved by them. It calls on us to develop the inner strength and discipline to direct our actions according to our own values, rather than being led by external forces. True freedom, according to Nietzsche, is not about escaping all constraints, but about mastering the ones we impose on ourselves and living in alignment with our truest desires and values. Nietzsche's ideas about freedom and self-mastery may seem difficult or even uncomfortable at first, but they offer a powerful vision of what it means to be truly free. They challenge us to look inward, to examine the ways in which we may be holding ourselves back, and to take responsibility for our own lives. In this sense, Nietzsche's philosophy is not just about rejecting the external world. It's about transforming our inner world, mastering ourselves, and creating a life that is truly our own.